My pleasure. Well, thank you so much for showing up, and for those who will catch this on recording. My name is Stephen Crawford, and I am right now in Minneapolis, Minnesota, in the U.S. So this is somewhere in the middle of the country for those of you that are familiar with it. And what I'm really excited about, I am a little bit of a nerd. I would say a recovering nerd, but I love to study certain elements that I understood make people tick. And understanding the brain and how the mind works has really been kind of a central focus. And I am really committed to this idea of exploring the limits of human potential and seeing what's possible when it comes to what we're capable of. But in order to do that, we've got to kind of look at things a little bit differently, because if most people will look at their situation and circumstance, and by definition, they'll determine that this is all that they can in this world that exists around them. And so I challenge people to think differently into this process. And I believe fundamentally that if we can figure out how to tap in and how to recode what is the way we're naturally wired, we can begin to produce results in our lives that we never thought possible before. At some point, Warren Buffett's a nice guy, but if our past is prologue, history will dictate that one day he will pass away, right? He's almost 100 years old, and at some point, Warren Buffett will pass away. And then one day when he passes away, they'll do an autopsy. And I can promise you this, they're going to discover some things about Warren Buffett. And one is that he has a heart. He's got a couple kidneys that work. He's got a liver, he's got organs that are very similar to every other human being. As a matter of fact, they're going to discover that there's not much different about Warren than there is about the gentleman that stands on the middle of the highway and asks for money. I mean, at least his anatomy. There's not going to be much different about Warren than it is from a person or another human being, as far as from eyes, ears, nose, mouth, all having the same parts. But what's different? And I get curious about what's different, because one person can have incredible results with their life and be identical in physical attributes, but something about the mind needs to shift and change. And this is true in life, and it's true in business. Some companies, they create businesses and they work really hard, and they figure out a way to generate $50,000 a year. And then other businesses work really hard. They're given the same time, the same opportunity, the same city even, and they figure out a way to generate $50 billion in revenue. And the distinction between these businesses is not opportunity. It's somewhat within the ingenuity and the understanding and the mindset. And so I want to tap into this curious idea of what would happen if we access all of us to produce all that we possibly could. Now, in order to do this, I like to show a little bit of a video that's been at the center of almost everything I've done for the last decade, which is getting to the heart of believing that if we actually deny that we can be responsible and change these things, then everything we're going to do is worthless. And so I'm going to show this video really quickly. I want you to take a look at, and I'll talk to you on the other side of the video. All right. And my apologies. Whenever you do this, I don't know if you guys know about this, and this is, but whenever you do this and you do the share, you have to hit the optimized video clip or it will not work really well. So apologies. Now,
Location, location, location. Brought to you by the Conscious Leadership Group. Find them on the web at www.conscious.is. Animation by Graham Franks. www.grahamfranks.com. One question that conscious leaders ask themselves over and over is, where am I? To support leaders in locating themselves as they ask the question, where am I? We offer this tool, a line, a simple black line. At any moment, all leaders and all people are either above the line or below the line. Our location describes how we're being with what is occurring in our life right now. If we're above the line, we are open, curious, and committed to learning. If we are below the line, we are closed, defensive, and committed to being right. Stop right now and simply ask yourself, where am I? In this now moment, am I above the line or below the line? Typically, when people are below the line, they believe certain things about the world. For example, they believe there is not enough. It could be that there's not enough money, or time, or space, or energy, or love. People below the line also believe that their story about the situation is right. People below the line also believe that there is a threat out there. Something or someone is threatening their desire for approval, control, or security. And people below the line see the situation as serious. The deeper below the line they are, the more serious things look. People below the line tend to behave certain ways as well. They tend to cling to an opinion, find fault and blame, gossip, explain, rationalize and justify, get overwhelmed, and avoid conflict or pursue conflict for the sake of winning. When people are above the line, they believe that learning and growing are more important than being right. They believe that all people and circumstances are their allies, here for their growth. They believe that from a distance, almost everything is funny. People above the line live in curiosity, listen deeply, speak unarguably, question all their beliefs, and live a life of play. Now, knowing what you know about being above or below the line, where are you? One thing to know as you consider this question: we are hardwired to go below the line. Literally, our brain is programmed to perceive threat, and when it does, a chemical cocktail courses through our veins, and we go below the line. This reaction was designed to help us survive in the presence of a real threat to our physical survival. An issue for modern-day leaders is that often our brains can't tell the difference between a threat to our physical survival and a threat to our ego or identity. We react and get defensive when we experience a threat to our ego. So in many ways, being below the line is natural and normal. But when we are below the line, we're not in a state, literally brain state, of high creativity, collaboration, innovation, and relational connection. We're simply trying to survive. Leaders today can't thrive if they're in survival mode. So the first activity of conscious leadership is location, location, location. In this now moment, where am I? Telling ourselves and others the truth about our current location begins the great conversation.
All right. And so that little cute video that I enjoy thoroughly every time I watch it, it suggests that if we don't take ownership, accountability, and responsibility for our own state, we fall below the line. Now, one of the things I do like about the authors of the book, and the book that they reference there is the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership, is that they say that there's nothing wrong with being below the line, and there's nothing wrong with being above the line. As a matter of fact, if you stand in a place of judgment, the typical thing is to judge negatively those people who are below the line, which puts you effectively below the line. And so not to be in a state of judgment, it's just a state of awareness. Where am I right now? And because of where I'm at, what does that give me the ability to do? Now, the only thing that is negative about being below the line is it may restrict me from achieving the goals that I want to pursue. It may limit me from being creative. It may restrict me from being collaborative. It may inhibit my innovation. And my question is, do I want to be in a more resourceful state that I have to open myself up, remain curious, and be above the line? Not negative or positive, just resourceful. I want to be in a place where I can access the best parts of my contribution. So the difference, going back to the beginning, between a Warren Buffett and a person who begs for money is not just the economic number. It is the place of resourcefulness that they're able to access within themselves in order to solve the problems that they're confronted with. And wherever you are in life and wherever you are in work and in your profession and in your business, the question is not whether you're in a bad place or a good place, but are you in a place not of having resources, but of being resourceful? It is the essence of who we are, and not the access to the tools that we have access to that give us the place that we want to be in our lives. And so really quickly, I did create a wonderful PowerPoint slide. So I'm going to go ahead and but unfortunately, there we go. All right, so I've got to figure out how to navigate all of this. I've been back into the real life world of doing presentations again, and I'm losing my touch on Zoom. What's going on here? All right. But I do want to just be able to think into a couple things. A lot of times when we're thinking about, especially when it comes to how to think, there are planners and there are dreamers, people who actually make plans and people who dream about what's possible. I like to see myself as a little bit of both. And what often happens is, in brain dominance theory, they refer to this as left brain and right brain. And on the left side, we've got words, math, logic, process, and short-term memory. But then we have art, music, creativity, feelings, and long-term memory. And the challenge with most learning environments is you have planners who operate very strongly on the left side of their brain, who basically are able to take the information, understand the information. The information, when they receive it, really excites them, but it's placed in their short-term memory. Then you have people who actively engage in the right brain, and they get bored with talks about facts and figures and numbers. It doesn't excite them to talk about all the raw data that takes place. They're more connected to art, music, and the creative feelings, and the learning goes into long-term memory. This is why when you're in kindergarten, what do? They're going to teach you the alphabet, but they're going to teach you with crayons. They're going to give you colors and art to be able to pull these things together. Because what they're trying to do is they're trying to create confusion. It's called bilateral learning. It's taking both hemispheres of the brain and it's actually creating tension so that you're not just pigeonholing one form of learning into this. So a lot of times when I'm challenging people to take notes, even when we're doing a conference, I say, don't use your black and blue pens. Use colorful markers. Use something. Don't just write notes in kind of just in rote form. Use mind maps. Use something that's going to be able to change. Draw pictures. Do little doodads and different creative things in order to make connections that you wouldn't necessarily make. Because if you really want to establish the highest level of your capacity to learn and then put it into your long-term memory, the way to do that is by integrating the different sides of the brain. And so one of the things that that I find interesting, in 1837, there was a gentleman who was traveling over to what we know as modern day Sri Lanka. And in his way traveling over there, he noticed there were some sand dunes that were sitting on top of just a heap. And he just said, boy, this seems really, really strange. As an archaeologist, this is really strange. And so, him and the camels, he kind of traveled over to where these sand dunes, and they began to dig. And what they discovered was the oldest known urban civilization. I think in the Bible, they call this place Nineveh. And they begin to dig and dig and dig and excavate. And they found things, this first oldest city, that they learned all these things. And so the tablet that you see in front of you is the oldest piece of literature, oldest piece of written literature that we have. Now, it took them over 50 years to really decode this. It was actually in the late 1850s and 60s and 70s when they finally began to figure out what this is. And it was the story of Gilgamesh slaying the dragon. That's the oldest story that we have that was written in human history. Now, I want you to think about this. Most of us live in a delusion. We actually believe we live in the world. We actually believe we live in Kansas, Minneapolis. We actually think we live in New York. We actually think we live in India, when in fact, we don't live in any of those places. We live in a story. We live, those places, the geography and the demographics of your life are basically backdrops to whatever story that you find yourself living in at the time. What you truly inhabit is not a house or trailer home or condominium. What you truly inhabit is a story that you live in, and you live in this by telling about yourself. One thing that's really, really interesting is that if we don't fundamentally change the story of our lives, what we'll find ourselves doing is really buying into the narrative that our conditions and circumstances are static. They exist as they are, and they must be this way. But what we need to figure out is, if we were somehow able to change the story of our lives, what could that mean for our futures? You know, many people have issues. As a matter of fact, I have friends that watch different versions of the news. And I say different versions because it's supposed to be news, it's supposed to be reporting what's actually taking place in our world. But what actually it's doing is projecting a slant or an idea or a side of a story. And so when you think about stories clashing, you look at the political, the social, the educational, the racial, economic, religious, organization, and cultural issues that emerge. Whenever there's conflict, you're not conflicted on the facts. We're conflicted on what story we're telling ourselves about the facts. Facts are often neutral and have a net new impact on us. But whatever story we tell ourselves about those facts, that changes our emotion, it changes our level of engagement, it changes our ability to actually pursue what's going on. And so most conflict we find is just a clashing of stories. One of my favorite quotes of all time was by a coach, Gay Hendricks. What he said was, he says, relational conflict is a consequence of two people trying to occupy the victim position at the same time. So you get two people fighting, oh, no, I'm the victim. No, I'm the victim. No, I'm the victim. No, you hurt me. No, you hurt me. That's where you get relational conflict. When one person gives up and says, you know, you're right, this shouldn't be that way, conflict ends. But we're walking around with about 8 billion stories on our globe. And these 8 billion stories are causing all types of tension, wars. We have these invisible lines that we call boundaries that people actually kill people for crossing. We have all types of wars and tribal conflicts. All of this coming because these stories are clashing. Now, here's the thing. If you really understand the way the world is built, vision is the first language of learning. And so we don't come out with a bunch of words. I know we argue and we fight over words, but that's not what we start out with. We start out with images. And these images somehow, in the first years of our life, they take on meaning. And certain things are good. For many people, sugar, that first hit of sugar is good. You know, the fork and the electric socket is bad. But we don't come out with that already ingrained within us. It is not, it is our contrived instinct that we learn, that we build meaning upon. They call this epistemology, where we build the foundation of our learning, the study of our knowledge and learning, and these foundations, and we organize information to have meaning. And we simply translate our version of the image into words. And so when we create those words, they mean certain things. And actually, I had the privilege of moving to Costa Rica for a year, and I was able to study a different language, and I was hearing some of the same words or ideas communicated in a different language. And what was amazing to me was how differently it was viewed, because words carry power when they're connected to certain types of images. Well, as we grow up, we start to create these stories that become limiting ideas and limiting beliefs within our lives. I love Anthony DeMello's quote. He says, "You have to understand, my dears, the shortest distance between the truth and a human being is the story." There's a story we're telling ourselves about the way life is, what should be, what could be, and what is right and what is fair. And we start to build this story. It reminds me of the old way they used to take circus animals and put chains around their ankles. And when you get these 2-ton huge circus animals with chains around their ankles, they have the power within their body to rip that chain like it was nothing. But because the chain is no longer on their leg, it's on their mind. Because when they were a child, when they were only 170, 180 pounds, a real light thing, that chain was strong enough to hold them. And it taught them that you can't break the chain. And my frustration in life, if I have one frustration, is watching people who are gifted, talented, brilliant, but they're living with chains around their mind because they're trapped in stories that tell them that they have limits. Which is why the mission of our organization is to explore the limits of human potential. We are looking for what's possible. But unfortunately, most people are just trapped in a story. Now, there's no accident to this. Now, this picture on the brain, now I did the picture because I normally take out my brain because I like showing people my physical brain when I do talks. But if you look at the way the occipital lobe sits on the hindbrain, and right in front of the temporal lobe and underneath the frontal lobe exists the eyeballs. This visual cortex that is developed from the front of the brain, it touches every part of the brain all the way back to the occipital lobe. It hosts the ideas and concepts, and it's the way we organize information. And then it processes that information through our memory, we call our memory bank, in order to organize that information to tell us what it means. And all of those things can create limits. But what if the story is wrong? What if the story you believe is wrong? The story you believe about your limitations, about what's possible, about what you should be achieving. What it will do is it will inform an identity within you that will lock you in to the way you see the world. Now, our brain is a prediction machine. And so when we begin to believe a story, we look for what is familiar. We look for what is outrageous. We look for what is fair. We look for what is right. And so we're triggered by different things in order to make that happen. And so when you look at every sacred text, the reason over 80% of all sacred texts are narrative is because they're not trying to teach you morality through learning about information about a God. What they're trying to teach you is the stories that help you shape the narrative of your life.
Interesting. Very interesting.
And so the 7 plots. So and Christopher Booker wrote it's called the 7 basic plots. And basically says if you took every story in history, doesn't matter the story, you would find one of 7 plots. The first one and the most popular is rebirth and renewal. We all love a story of being trapped in a world that we need to escape from because we have been unfairly imprisoned by an idea. And no matter what our history was, we have the ability to break forth and become new. Then you have the quest. This is the person who leaves where they are because they need to go out and find out how to solve a problem that the rest of the world has not figured out yet. Then we have the rags to riches. Everybody loves the Cinderella story. It's the most famous story in America anyway. And it's because when you look at the world, most of the world does not have. So this idea of intrinsic inspiration that something is going to happen externally that's going to change my internal situation is so appealing because it relieves us of the need to feel like we have to take responsibility for ourselves. Then we have either comedy or tragedy. Those are 2 different stories and they both have the same plot where a series of tragic events happens to the main character. But in one plot, in the comedy, it's funny, and the tragedy is sad. But it's both the same plot with a different twist, depending upon how we view the main character. Then we have a great voyage or fantasy. Nothing greater than The Wizard of Oz, one of the best books ever written. was The Wizard of Oz. And we do a whole teaching that Thomas Trower did on completeness. Thomas Trower was a judge in the 1850s. So he wrote a book. Well, he wrote many books, but one is called Completeness. And it talks about how all the characters that are represented in the entire story of The Wizard of Oz are all Dorothy. It's a powerful. Every character, from the witch to the scarecrow, all of them are her. And even the path and the enlightenment to find her own path was always inside of her. Anyway, it's a fascinating, but it captures your imagination. It's a great fantasy or voyage. And finally, the most popular of all stories, problem of evil, and the problem of what's dark in this world, and the problem of people who do hateful, hurtful things, the causers of pain. And one of the most difficult things is we have to overcome the challenge of the monster, even when the monster is us. And so if you organize all these plots and all these stories, our brain is a prediction machine. So we're looking for, how does our world, how does our narrative figure out which story we're in, what parts are we accessing? I was talking with a counselor who was very concerned about the story of Beauty and the Beast, because after watching the Disney version of Beauty and the Beast, the man was yelling at her using very verbally angry language. If he was roaring, if she doesn't eat with me, she won't eat at all. He was very angry, very hostile. And they interviewed girls after this film and says, well, what would you tell Belle if she was your friend? He says, well, I would just say, just keep being nice to him. Eventually he'll love you. Eventually he'll change. Eventually he'll turn into a prince. And she said, the counselor suggested that is not the narrative that she wanted little girls believing and thinking and walking away from. But all of these narratives are all built into our human psyche. We are all of these characters. We are all of these people. We are the monster. We are on a great voyage of fantasy. We are following a quest. Our life is a comedy sometimes, and it is a tragedy. We can relate to all of these things. We do aspire to go from rags to riches. We do want to go to a place where we can have rebirth and renewal, and we don't want to believe that our saddest state is the end of our story. And so we're attracted to these, we're watching these things, but what's happening to all of us is we're sitting in an environment where we're like, all right, well, how do I get out of here? So I'm from the south side of Chicago. This is a picture of, this is about 4 blocks down from the place where I grew up. And I get to go there. And as a matter of fact, my brother is a Chicago police officer. He's not in this picture, but boy, there's a couple guys in there that look like him. Anyway, so, but this was my house, 7400 Meriden. This is Maryland, the story that I grew up with. And so you can see this, by the time Google got a picture of it in 2011, it was all boarded up. You know, when it go a little bit further, they start ripping it out. As a matter of fact, if you go to one side of this in Google images, you can actually see people who were doing drugs coming out of the house because it was completely abandoned. And then this is what it looks like right now. It's been completely abandoned, completely torn down. Behind me is another empty parking lot that used to be Echo's Movers. There's a lot of people moving there, but this is outside of Chicago. This is where I grew up, but it shaped my narrative. And you know what also shaped my narrative? The ambulances that drove by us every other night. The gunshots that when we were younger, they told us were firecrackers because they didn't want us to be afraid. What also shaped the narrative about who I was and who I was becoming was the fact that we never had money to go get the regular food. So we had to wait in lines and we had to get redistributed food. The cans that were all generic, the cheese that we got from the government, the powdered milk that we made in order to eat our cereal with. It all taught me about life and limitation. And so I was growing up, and my story that was passing into it was what the limitations were. And it was building a frame around me that told me what was possible. And this is the challenge with most of us, is that humanly, physically, I'm no different than a young man that grew up probably 70 minutes to the north in Barrington, Illinois. Intellectually, I'm probably no less intelligent, but that's not the way I was treated, because when I went to school, teachers treated me and other children like me as if there were limitations upon our ability to learn. And so I proudly graduated from high school with a 1.7 GPA. So congratulations, I made it out. I had to take special courses in college just to be able to actually make it through. And I planned on dropping out. And something happened to me when I was in my freshman year in college. I had a story that I was not that smart. I was of average intelligence. And I got called up to the front of the room by a philosophy professor. And the only reason I'm in a 300 level philosophy class is because there was a girl that was very attractive that I wanted to get to know in that class. And I figured I was dropping out of school anyway, so what difference if I failed one more class? So it really didn't make a difference. And after I did a paper, he called me up to the front. He says, son, I wanted to talk to you for a second. He says, I want to let you know, you see the world differently. And you're actually pretty brilliant. He says, as a matter of fact, if it weren't for all the bad grammar, I would have thought you cheated on this paper. He said, but he says, nobody really smart would have actually, and he began to help reshape my narrative. He began to send me in different directions to take different classes. I began to stop taking classes that repeated the narrative I was dumb and stupid. I began to take classes that began to elevate my way of thinking and actually began to teach me systems. So by the time I went to graduate school and then I went to got my doctorate, it was like I was only taking classes that were activating the parts of my brain that activated my brilliance, so to speak. And it shaped and reshaped my story. But that wasn't enough for me, because it's not, listen, I'm telling you, I was the smartest kid at the car dealership. When I came back from Costa Rica and needed to find a job. It doesn't mean I could monetize just because I felt smarter and I had degrees now, didn't make me any wiser. I had to build myself. And unless you're committed to building yourself, and this is one thing that I really want you to just to get out of this, is that your identity and what you believe about yourself needs to shift before you can change your results. I had to change what I believed about me. It wasn't so much. I didn't believe I was dumb and stupid anymore, but I still had poverty in the back of my mind. And I needed to shift that. And here's one thing about identity. And when you really come to Dr. Maxwell Maltz wrote a book called Psycho-Cybernetics, and there were some things that he brought out that I really want to bring to the forefront. He said, you cannot act in a way that is inconsistent with how you perceive yourself. If you perceive yourself to be a certain way, you cannot act otherwise. You have constructed a mental picture of yourself, and you can't act outside of how you perceive yourself to be. Your self-image is internally constructed, and it builds a moral code. That means if you're told you're stupid, it actually becomes immoral for you to study. It becomes a violation of your moral code, of your ethic. If you're told you're a liar, it becomes unethical to tell the truth. It becomes immoral. And most people, when they realize that most of the time you're fighting when it comes to chasing after your dreams or doing what you want to do or really pursuing the best version of yourself, you might be fighting against your own morality to become the best version of you. Because something in your past has constructed an idea that that's not who you are. And you cannot fight against your own nature. Self-communication is the strongest determinant of self-image. So there's a voice. We have about 80,000 thoughts per day. They say somewhere between 60 and 80, but I like to go high, right? 80,000 thoughts a day. 90% of those thoughts recur in our mind every single day. They do not change. Now, very few of these thoughts are conscious. Most of them are the voices driving our other than conscious mind. And with those thoughts, it tells us who we are, what we're to believe, and how we're to live. and you've tried to do willpower to overcome. So you say, hey, you know what? I want to eat, I want to be healthy. You know, I've let myself go. I want to be healthy. I'm going to choose to employ willpower. Willpower doesn't stand a chance against be power. Who you are is more powerful than what you will. If you have to be actively engaged mentally, the average human mind can only think for about 2.3 hours per day. That's what you can do, active conscious thought. And in order to pursue willpower, you have to be actively consciously thinking. That means you are burning yourself out, you're wearing out a bunch of calories, and your body just cannot handle that. You have to have agreement on all cores of your being. We have an intellect, we live in a body, but the essence of who we are is of a higher level and a higher intelligence and higher order. And that higher order that seeks some type of spiritual contribution that says, hey, I want to give back to my community, or I want to love my family. That higher order of who we are, that's beautiful, that's great. And that's higher order tells us, I want to be healthy. And intellect says, oh, I know exactly how to do it. We're going to eat less calories. We're going to move our body, you know. And so we've got the plan. The problem is you live in a human body, and that gets a vote. So at 5 o'clock in the morning when that alarm goes off, the body says, no, thank you. You did not get my buy-in. Because willpower only lasts so long. But if you can change the way you perceive yourself, that self-image, that changes everything. Because you will always act in accordance with how you perceive yourself to be. Ultimately, it's the story we tell ourselves about ourselves. We are hardwired for stories. Our brains, they actively take in the information and they organize them into a story. And that's why it's easy to remember a story than hard, cold facts. And so here's what happens. Most of us live between 3 different characters. There's the hero or the rescuer. And he says, I need to jump in and do something about every problem that I see. There's the villain, the one who not only attacks themselves, but attacks other people in order to right the world or balance the world. There's the victim. This is the person that everybody knows because it's always someone else's fault. It's never their responsibility, never their fault. But between these 3 roles that we play within a story, here's the question. Each one of them has their own dilemma. And if we're going to build out of this, we've got to step out of the story and realize that we are not the rescuer, the persecutor, or the victim. We are the architect and we are the writer of our story. Now, I know that takes a lot of energy to think about, but what if you weren't in the story? What if you were the author? What if you became the writer? And you could write any story you want to, and you were no longer trapped within other people's ideas and other people's thoughts about who you should and could become. Most of us live within this and we try to make ourselves into the hero, but the hero has a dilemma too, don't they? The hero wants drama. They need an epic battle and they need to be the center of attention. The author sometimes is a silent voice because the author is guiding the story. And you can have anything you want as long as you're writing the story. But if you need to be the central figure, a lot of times it will always limit you. And so many of us, we become addicted to drugs. Most of us love action. We like having that good high feeling. For some people, they get their dopamine hits. We're not addicted. Now, when I say addicted to drugs, I don't mean physical drugs. I mean the ones your body produces. This is what a story does for us. It gives you certain drugs into your body. And so some people, that boy, all they need is a good list, And if they could do all of the things that are on their lists, that dopamine just flows. They love to get, I finished my list. Yes. And they become emotionally satisfied. Other people, oxytocin, they need to feel connected. It's a trust drug. One of the stranger things that I found out about was that, did you know they used to take oxytocin, the kind of a synthetic oxytocin, and spray it in car dealerships to drop people's resistance? Anyway, strange fact. I just like, wow, that's a strange thing to do, but that's what they used to do, right? And so, but oxytocin is the trust drug. It makes people want to hug. It makes people want to feel comfortable. And we activate oxytocin within it. And some people's narrative is built around connection and human connection. You know, others around endorphins, and they have to have that high level of activity and energy. Others around serotonin. And so we build these different models of the world. And then we have all the nasty drugs, right? The adrenaline, the norepinephrine, and cortisol. Now, these aren't necessarily negative unless they're released into your body for long periods of time. Then it becomes traumatic. The body isn't built to have these drugs in your body just in a constant flow. And so what we need to do is we need to pull ourselves back and say, listen, who's in charge of this story? Because if I want to create the most successful conditions for my life, what do I need to be happening and flowing into my life? And that's what we need to start building. We need to start understanding that growth is not automatic. It is not accidental. You don't automatically find yourself in growth mode. One of the things that many people suffer with is, as an example, is the self-esteem trap. And I'll just say this about this because I've seen this so often, especially amongst maybe not all people, but young professionals, is that they get trapped in the self-esteem trap to believe that they deserve a participation trophy for everything. They should win at everything. And when they're not winning, it affects self-esteem. And the reframing of that, the rewriting of that story is to say, no, failure is good. And Carol Dweck did a great job in her book, Growth Mindset. And she talked about the recursive process, that if you adopt a growth mindset, when you experience failure, you'll actually increase effort, achieve higher levels of achievement, and then it'll reinforce the growth mindset. But a failure mindset or fixed mindset will actually cause you to reduce effort, reinforce it, lower achievement, and it'll reinforce the fixed mindset. And so if you have this recursive process that constantly builds you into a person that you have low self-image and low self-esteem because you're locked into a certain way of thinking, well, you can see really quickly, this person may come out of college, these two people may come out of college the same year, but give them 5 years and their success trajectory will be vastly different. Because one understands when they experience failure, it doesn't mean that they're a failure. They need to work harder. The other one has internalized a fixed mindset that when they experience failure, they're just not good at it. They need to give up and do something else. I have a lot of gifts in my life, a lot of talents, but I will probably never win a Grammy. I am not a singer. That's not who I am. And isn't it amazing how most of us will focus on the 1 or 2 things that we don't do well and then consider ourselves failures, while we ignore some of the things that we're naturally brilliant at? I can see a pattern anywhere. That's why I was so good at philosophy. I saw patterns. Almost as a natural, I could see patterns and things coming together, and I think being to make sense out of things. And so when I became a communicator, to communicate about things that actually make sense, I began to help change people's lives. But I could still be going on the show American Idol and trying to figure out the voice thing. Or I can put my strengths to work, increase my effort, and even though I have failed as a communicator many times, I keep working hard at it and keep developing and honing my skill in order to achieve higher achievement. And so it's about where we're focused and how we're doing. And so if you look at it, there's the essence of who we are. And this is the philosophy that I definitely support. It's called be, do, have. Who we are times what we do gives us what we have. So what most people do is they want to change their results. And so they says, all right, I want to change my results. I like using exercise because exercise is a fun one to work with. I'm just going to work hard. I'm going to go to the gym. And as many of you know, that lasts for about 20 days, and then we're done. We kind of give up. Why? Something's not working. And let me tell you that the path that needs to shift is this. We have thoughts. Those thoughts create actions. Those actions create habits. Those habits shape our character, which reinforce our thoughts. Let me work with me on this for a little bit. The seed creates the plant, produces the fruit that gives us food. And what often happens with people is they try to do something and they violate this be, do, have. They think by doing something they should get a result. But if the essence of their thoughts, the essence of their thinking does not shift and change, it won't inform their actions. And so their actions are misguided because they try to skip the process, went straight for the do because they think they're a human doing and not a human being. They went straight for the do and they bypass, how do I change how I think? You don't get what you want in life, you get who you are. You must change the essence of who you are. And as James Allen put it, we are what we think about. And whatever we constantly think about will produce what we do eventually. So we have to change the mindset, the set of our mind, in order to inform our actions. That will build habitual behavior that will happen over and over again. It'll shape our character, and that'll give you who you are. You can have anything you want in life. You just have to be thinking about it at the right time. And so what we say is that there needs to be a level of dissatisfaction. If someone is consistently happy with the way their life is, they're kind of stuck there. You must be dissatisfied. Then you need a clear vision of what you're after. What are you going after? And then we need to put into place, what are the first steps I need to take? And then you have to all measure that up, and it has to be greater than your resistance to change. If we can build this formula up, we can begin to inform and change the thinking and become the person that we want to be. And so, but in order to do that, as I've mentioned from the beginning, we don't live in the world, we live in a story. And with this story, there are scripts that you've been given. You're not only reading the lines, but you're living the life of what these scripts are. And if you want to break the pattern, you must first break the script. And so, went a little longer than I planned to, but I want to be able to open it up. 9 minutes left for just a conversation and question and answer. But thank you so much just for your patience. We're going to be, and I appreciate the partnership here. We're going to be opening up people that want to dig deep into this and really get into that mindset. We're going to be opening up an opportunity to take to go on a 6-week journey of reprogramming your mind, which is a whole process that we build. We laid out the framework for the process here, but there's a whole process to being able to do that. And so, but I definitely wanted to, I know we go till 3, and I wanted to make sure we had time enough to open it up for conversation and question and thoughts. So do we want to, Chris, Dory, do you want to facilitate or open it up, or do we just, people just unmute themselves?
Everyone is loving it so much. Stephen, thank you so much. I mean, it's just, I went around and shamed everyone that didn't come that I could get my hand on. That's all I can say. And I'm really happy to see so many of the great folks that did make it. And so we're just excited about the opportunity. And, you know, I'll pass it over to Dory, and just happy to be facilitating any kind of conversation or feedback anyone has to share. Just thanks again. Dory, you're on mute if you wanted to mention.
Yep. Yeah. Let's start a dialogue here. Jamie, would you like to unmute yourself and let us know your thoughts?
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for this. This is awesome stuff. I really appreciate it. A lot of great wisdom, and I appreciate what you mentioning that you graduated with a 1.7. I was a little bit higher than that, and to be honest with you, so I'm not trying to shame you at all, but still, I didn't think it was great, and I thought, well, I'm never going to accomplish anything, and I've done pretty well for myself. By the same token, I think out of ignorance, absolute ignorance, I've done stuff that I didn't think I could do, largely because I didn't know that it was going to be as difficult as it was. And if there's one thing I can relate to, is that concept of hearing words and limiting myself because of those words, and not doing things that others said that were too difficult. And most of the things I've accomplished were because I was completely ignorant to how difficult they were. The more I know of how difficult things are, even today I struggle with this, I don't push myself as much as when I don't know that what I'm doing is actually difficult. All I think it is that I just got to stay up till midnight, 1, 2, 3 in the morning, and it'll click, and it does. But it's, again, my ignorance has been my greatest ally in doing stuff that was way over my head. So I appreciate so much what you're saying, and I want to know how I can continue pursuing a lot of this knowledge that you're sharing, that I think I've probably learned a lot of it, forgotten about, because of this ugly thing called life. Beautiful thing at the same time.
Absolutely. Well, I definitely appreciate that. And I definitely think that when we offer the study, I would definitely highly recommend jumping in. But just your comment there made me think of, that's the name of my book, Too Stupid to Fail.
Well, I want it.
Awesome. I remember. I love that so much. Yeah. That's why I like this guy from the start, right? Because I resonate with that too, Jamie, so much.
Yeah.
That's 100% it. I mean, if I knew better, I would have never done it. It was my ignorance that allowed me to do the stupid things. And I jumped out the plane and built my wings on the way down. And oh my gosh.
Nice.
So glad I did.
Great. And Chris, did I understand you right, that you saw the title of the book and you thought of me? Is that what you said?
When you were speaking of your words, that was the first thing I thought of when I saw that book. For one, man, that Valentine guy. But no, just when you were speaking, that's the essence of everything that I've ever experienced. Of course, working with my beloved engineering community here, who I'm somewhat a part of that community and somewhat not. And so that I find is a daily experience. Why would we do that? Here's all the reasons we shouldn't. No. If I did that, we'd be in trouble. We would very much be in trouble. I have to tell my wife this, if I figured out reasons not to do things, we wouldn't have anything. So good luck with that approach. But yeah, no, I love that Stephen's book was titled that. And I just thought, immediately, wow, what else is he going to say after that? Just basically. So again, I feel we're just so honored. Thank you again.
Yeah, I've always referred to it as jumping off the cliff. I've jumped off the cliff so many times in my life and have no idea what's on the other end. It's empowering.
It is. And I love the example that one of my mentors gives. He says, the problem is that he says, if I were to have three grown men jump on the table that this computer is on, it break. But if you close your eyes and take 5 elephants and set it on top of the table, just imagine 5 elephants, it doesn't break. Why? Because the mind has no limitation. Physical limitation is just exactly what it is. And the universe doesn't understand the difference between an ant and an elephant. Gravity does not struggle. Oh my gosh, another elephant. I can't believe it. It doesn't, it doesn't, gravity doesn't struggle when another elephant is born. Like, oh my gosh, are we going to be able to hold this one down? And if we understand how to apply these natural laws to the way we live and the way we dream and what we're able to achieve, and stop limiting ourselves, our limitations are self-imposed, without a doubt.
I just want to comment myself that, this is the stuff that Stephen's talking about here is, he mentioned sacred texts, and, this is just universal, right? It's universal law. And I think I resonate with what you said as well, Jamie, is we forget a lot of this stuff, right? And I think actually Stephen touched on that with the confusion, right, of the left, right, and the mechanisms that we use to remind ourselves of these things. And I know that's a lot about what Dory helps us remember as well, just sort of slowing down, and taking yourself out of the context for even 10 minutes, in a day, can literally, as they say, work wonders, in doing that. And some of these keys that we don't show up to these talks, we don't seek this knowledge, we won't remember, we'll continually be living that lie that Stephen's talking about, and thinking we live in Kansas or whatever, when we're not really in Kansas anymore, and we can be wherever we want to be. And I think that's a lot about what we're talking about here at Esteemed all the time. And I just wanted to end with saying that we're super excited again about our partnerships with Stephen, and looking forward to bringing his messages out to some of our live stuff that we're doing out at the conferences and the meets and the camps and everything. And, helping to work together to, as we grow our community, talking about how these kinds of things go on to try to help everyone in their careers and, moving forward out there in life. Again, just to increase all of our collective and individual contentedness, where, we want to be thriving, but we also want to be feeling secure, and safe, that we have what we feel we need, to operate. And so thanks again so much. You'll be seeing more information out there about some of the follow-on programs that we're cultivating and that exist. We hope to see you again at future events out there. And I think we're going to try to work getting Stephen out to Ned Camp if anybody's going there. So look forward to seeing you there. Dory will be there. Matt Obert will be there. So yeah, just exciting stuff. Thanks again. And look forward to seeing you all around there on Slack and in person, and see you in the future. Thanks again, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Great to meet you.
Thanks so much.
Bye, everyone.